So let's talk term insurance basics, okay? So here's time, here's dollars. Let's look at $1 million term policy, not with us, not with another, just any term policy anywhere. $1 million face amount for easy math, okay? So here's time, here's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. So let's say you buy a 20-year, $1 million term, doesn't matter what company it's through. For all practical intents and purposes, this is how that policy works. $1 million for 20 years, 20 years from now, it ends. Technically, it doesn't just end, and this is where you need to know your stuff. Okay, there's 3 choices at the end of virtually all term insurance. Okay, choice 1 is you can renew. Virtually all term insurance is renewable. Renew is keep the same policy, but at a different rate. The problem with renewals is most renewals range anywhere from 8 to sometimes 45 times the original cost. So they're paying $1,000 a year annual premium. 20 years from now, it renews, it's $12,000 a year, or $20,000 a year, or $40,000 a year in some cases, right? So the renewal is generally not a feasible option because the multiple of the premium has gone up to a point where people cannot pay it, okay? So it's an option, but it's not viable virtually ever, and so nobody does it. The second option is you can do what's called a conversion or an exchange. A conversion or an exchange would be to switch from the current product to some future product, okay? Term insurance outside of Primerica is convertible to permanent insurance only. Permanent insurance only. They will not allow you to convert to other term insurance. And you read the conversion privileges, go and look at it, verify it with yourself, always look at it, show the client the conversion privileges. It'll say, you know, for a permanent life insurance policy, sometimes it'll say things like to any policy available as determined by us besides term insurance, cannot do term insurance, okay? Well, the problem is if the renewal is term insurance and the term insurance is 10 or 15 or 20 times more expensive, what's the conversion to permanent insurance going to be? It's going to be even more expensive, right? Maybe 30, 40, 50 times as expensive. So nobody's going to do that, right? The third option is you take another health test, try to get new term insurance. The problem is you're 20 years older. Who knows what's happened to your health? You're going to pay more because you're older, obviously, but a lot of people are not able, as life goes on, to continue to prove into the premium rate classes that they had before. So now they're not only older, but they're getting, you know, substandard ratings, or they're moving from a preferred to a standard rating, and sometimes they become uninsurable. So I want you to understand this and look at this graphic, because this is not how people's need for life insurance works. People's need for life insurance does something like that, right? It's a theory of decreasing responsibility. Today, a high need for life insurance, eventually a low need for life insurance, right? If here's an asset column down here, right? Today it's low, but over time, the asset column is going to go up, right? You've seen this 1,000 times. But in practice, term insurance after time 1 virtually never gets the client, not never, but virtually never, gets the client to the point where they are self-insured. We know the statistics in the United States and in Canada today, right? Savings rates are near all-time lows. People do not have enough money statistically to retire, you know, in their 50s and 60s like they used to be able to. People are having to work. They're carrying debt loads longer. They have not saved enough. They need more money than ever saved. You know, so there's a lot of factors that are causing people to need term insurance longer. Okay, so watch this. When you find somebody with term insurance, there's 3 scenarios. 1, you are playing cheaper, right? So they have a 20-year term. They're 2 years in. You show them a 20-year term with us, it's flat out cheaper, wonderful. Go ahead and do some closing questions, do the close, take the app, no problem, okay? Those are easy. Thank goodness for expensive term insurance companies that are out there, right? Okay, but there's 2 other scenarios on term insurance where it's not that cut and dry, and you've got to learn how to master this product and be able to master communicating the product to the client, because a client is going to be put in an incredible position by switching their life product over to the Primerica life companies, right? Because of our end of term conversion feature, okay? So 2 other options, right? Number 1, it's cheaper. Number 2, it's not cheaper because you're competing at some sort of a disadvantage, right? They had a 20-year policy, they're 3 years in. right? So the 3 good years are gone and you're going in a new 20-year policy. So you're taking them 3 years longer than their original one has. You're trading good years for bad years. It's going to be hard to compete on price. But price is only an issue in the absence of value, and you've got tremendous value that nobody else can give across the kitchen table, and I'm going to explain that to you. So it's not cheaper, okay, but there's a need beyond the term. There's a need beyond the current term, okay? And the third scenario is it's not cheaper because of whatever factors are being considered. They're older now, etc. This is not cheaper in monthly premium. And there's no need for insurance beyond the term. Those are the 3 scenarios, okay? So here's how we identify which scenario we're in, okay? And then let me give you some presentations and some generalities, right? And let me stress to you, you need to read these tables. You need to get very, very familiar with how the conversion tables work to the decreasing term, okay? Because it's different all the time. It's dependent on their age when they convert. It's depending on the health class they had. It's depending on the total face value they had for the original policy. There's some factors that make things different. So I'm going to speak in generalities, but you're going to get the concept and you're going to get the power and value of this product here, okay? So again, here's term insurance in general, right? Time, dollars, here's the $1 million, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Okay, so what I do, say we're dealing with a client, 20-year term, $1 million face value, they're 3 years in, okay? So they got a 20-year term with company ABC, $1 million face value, 3 years in, so they have 17 years left, okay? It's not 20 years left, 17 years left. I ask them this, I say, Bob and Susan, let me ask you a question. Your policy is going to come up in 17 years. Can you tell me today, beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolute certainty, that you're not going to need $1 of this life insurance in 17 years? Okay, let me say that again. Bob and Susan, can you tell me today, beyond a shadow of a doubt, 100% absolute certainty, that in 17 years, you're not going to need $1 of this life insurance? That is a $1 million question, guys. Okay, you get that down. You ask that every time you come across a term that price to price, you're playing a different ball game because of the feature of the policy and how long it's been enforced. Okay, this is going to help you help a lot of people. It's going to help you help yourself in creating, the ability to help more people move forward. Okay, so virtually always the answer to that question is no. Right? The answer to that question is no. In 17 years, I'm not totally certain that I'm not going to need any insurance. If the answer to that question is no, guys, the sale is done. The sale is made right there. If you can explain what I'm going to show you, sale's done. Price doesn't matter. Guys, I've helped clients where the current premium prices are many percentages more than they're currently paying, but it's going to save them enormous amounts of money over the total amount of time they're going to need life insurance. So here's what I do. I say, great, so Bob, let me draw you a picture real quick of how your policy's working for all practical intents and purposes, right? So, here's your $1 million, and it's going to be there for the next 17 years, and then 17 years from now it goes away. It doesn't just go away, but like I just showed you in your policy, right? So I show them the renewal rate, and I ask them, are you going to pay this? Right, it's $1,000 a year now. It goes to $13,000 a year, right? So it went from $1,000 a year to $1,000 a month. I ask him, "Are you going to pay this?" And his answer is going to be no. No, I'm not going to pay it. Great, but you told me you're going to need some coverage probably beyond that time, right? Right. Okay. Well, then the policy that you have is not going to work for you. You'd agree with that, right? Because for 17 years you're good, but then you're not going to be able to keep this, right? Okay. So let me ask you this, Bob. What if I were able to get you a policy that did something like this? Let's say it gave you the same $1 million and it even gave it to you a couple years longer than you have it. But at the end, instead of just going away completely, it went down pretty substantially, okay? And this is just a generality. We'll go through your specifics, okay? It went down substantially, but then went down little by little every year until you were 100, at which point it'd be worth 0. Right? Because your need for insurance is kind of looking like this, right? You said, I'm still going to probably need some at the end, okay? And your policy doesn't give you that feature. So what if we could extend it a little bit, but not only extend it, we could let you keep a relatively substantial amount of coverage, Bob, with no health check at this point and no increases in premium. If we could do that, That would solve the problem of your policy going up to $1,000 a month. Wouldn't you agree? Great, because we can do that for you. Obviously, you got to get qualified for it, but if we can issue it, that's what it's going to look like. Okay, great. So this scenario that I'm showing you is what is called our conversion or exchange to decreasing term to 100. So I'm going to encourage you to go into our policies to exchange section 5. On virtually all of our policies, it's found on page 7, okay? And I want you to read it. And what it says is it says that you can exchange this policy at any time after it's been enforced for 5 years to the annually increasing premium term insurance to age 100 or to the decreasing term insurance to age 100 plan described below. If the exchange is for the same class of insurance, we will not require evidence of insurability. Okay, I have this memorized. I can visualize this paragraph as I'm reading it. What does this mean? What does this gobbledygook mean? It means the difference of having insurance in later years and not having insurance in later years for the client. Because on any other term product, they will not allow them to do this. So what this means in practice, okay, we're not going to talk about the increasing premium term. There's not a big use for that. But the decreasing term is totally in alignment with our philosophy of theory of decreasing responsibility and the fact that most people are not going to be able to be totally independent of term insurance after their first term. So what Primerica says is regardless of your health, you could be uninsurable anywhere else, have a heart attack, stroke, nobody will give you insurance for any money. Primerica doesn't care. At the end of your term, we're going to give you another term product in the same class of insurance, same health class that you had before. Okay, and the way the decreasing term works, it's a function of $100 of basic annual premium. It means if they're paying $1,000 now, they will have a choice at the end to keep paying $1,000 a year. Okay, and that $1,000 a year will buy them a certain amount of coverage in that year, right? Depending on their face value when they first got the policy, their health rating, and the age they are when they convert it. But guys, listen, nobody else out there is allowing people to keep term insurance without a health check at the same price they had before. Granted, they're getting less, but they need less. So you went from taking a client that said they had a heart attack here, when they get to that 17-year period on that original term policy, they're out of luck. They're not going to have insurance is what's going to happen. And this need here is going to go unfulfilled. But with Primerica, not only in this case would we be able to expand it out some, right, but we'd be able to continue meeting that need, although lower, with no health check, no increases in premium. Nobody is making that promise across the kitchen table besides Primerica. When you really understand the impact that that clause has to a client and their future need for insurance, you will be as sold as I am that this is the right product for the consumer. It gives the consumer choice and control at the end of term that they have nowhere else. Everywhere else, they're at the mercy of their health. They're not healthy, they're not getting insurance. Okay, here, that's off the table. We guarantee you the same rating class to a decreasing term. Here's the other cool thing. You can actually buy this up. So now let me talk to you as an agent so you understand exactly how this works and then can convey it to the client, right? So I'm not saying this specifically to the client, but I want you to understand it. So let's say on this $1 million policy, the decreasing term conversion for this specific client went down to $200,000. You might say, well, that's a lot of drop from $1 million to $200,000. Well, go and read those tables. Sometimes your $1 million becomes $940,000. If you're in a certain demographic and you had a 10-year term and you were 30 years old and you were preferred, okay? And sometimes it drops down to like, 10 or 12% of the coverage and everywhere in between. So you need to get familiar with how the conversions work. But here's the end all be all of this. In this case, drops to 200,000. Say, well, that's not very much. Remember, they're 20 years older. They have 20 years less debt. They have 20 years more saved. Their children have grown by 20 years. That's unavoidable. That has happened. They need less insurance, theoretically, than they needed 20 years ago, right? They're still going to need some, okay? And remember this, they had a heart attack over at this point. They're not getting a nickel of insurance for for any amount of money from anybody, right? Okay, on a new issue. And so they're thankful to have that. But what if you wanted more than the $200,000 in that case? Believe it or not, with the Custom Advantage product, you can buy that decreasing term conversion up. Say you're paying $1,000 and it gave you 200 grand. Well, theoretically, you would be able to double it, say, you know what, I want 400 grand. Okay, well, then your premium went from 1,000 to 2,000 a year, but it didn't go to 30,000 a year or 10,000 a year. It was manageable. The client has control and choice. And control and choice are two of the most important things when it comes to people's finances, right? So this is how you explain the value of the decreasing term. And remember, the million-dollar question, are you able to tell me today with 100% certainty, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you're not going to need $1 of this life insurance in so many years? When the answer to that is no, the sale is made, because this product simply meets the client's needs better, gives them flexibility into an unknown future more than any other product that is available in the marketplace. So now let's talk about what I think is the most complex piece of this. It is also one of the least used, but you need to know it, because when you use them, they tend to be big policies. Okay, so you got to get this. Our product is called Custom Advantage. Believe it or not, it's not just a nice name. Okay, it actually has a custom advantage. So here's the other scenario, right? So here's our time again, our dollars, $1 million, 20-year term. So here's 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Let's do the same scenario. $1 million face value, 20-year policy, 3 years in, which means they got 17 years left. And you ask that client, Mr. and Mrs. Client, are you able to tell me today with 100% certainty, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that in 17 years, when this policy's up, you're not going to need any life insurance whatsoever? And they look back at you, say, yeah, I'm positive I'm not going to need insurance. I'm going to be self-insured. You're probably dealing with somebody who's done very well financially. They probably have quite a bit of investable assets out there that you can get, okay? And you have the ability to make a big difference for these people. So let me explain this to you. So here's what I say. I say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, let me kind of explain to you what's going on, and then let me show you how I think we can provide some value to you. So Mr. and Mrs. Client, for all practical intents and purposes, this is how your policy is going to work. For the next 17 years, you have $1 million in coverage, and then in 17 years, when it's ready to go away, you're telling me I'm going to be totally okay with it going away, right? That's what you've told me, correct? Okay, so let me ask you this. What you're saying is in 17 years, I'm not going to need any life insurance, right? Okay. Well, if in year 17, you needed 0 life insurance, Mr. and Mrs. Client, in year 16, day 364, so the day before, you needed 0. Did you need $1 million of life insurance the very day before? Probably not, right? If you needed 0 the day before, you probably needed $5 or 10, but you didn't need $1 million. Your insurance need didn't go from $1 million to 0 overnight, right? Unless you win the lottery, right? What's happening, Mr. and Mrs. Client, is your insurance need is kind of doing this, right? That's what you're telling me. I'm going to be self-insured. I'm going to need less and less until I get there, and then I'm going to need 0, right? Okay, very good. Well, right now, you have a policy that's kind of like an off-the-rack suit, so to speak, kind of one size fits all. You bought it for 20 years. You said at the end of 20 years, I'm not going to need it. But in practice, what's happening is, you need all of it now, but you're going to need less and less as time goes on. So you see this coverage over here that you've purchased. You purchased it, you're paying for it, but what you're telling me is I don't really need it. It's extra, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Client, let me ask you a question. Do you enjoy paying for insurance that you don't need? No, of course not. Nobody does, right? So what if I was able to build you a policy, a custom policy designed for you, not off the rack, that more accurately mimicked your need for life insurance and cost you less money than you were paying now for it? So if it more accurately followed that and it cost you less, is there any reason you would want to continue overpaying for insurance you don't need? That is $1 million question there, folks, okay? Because nobody's going to say yes. Yes, I would like to continue to be overcharged paying for insurance I don't need, right? Of course they want to pay less, but you've got to qualify it. If I was able to get you a policy that more accurately mimicked your stated need for life insurance and it cost you less, would you go forward with something like that? All right, and then here's how you do it. You can build a custom plan. So you have a base plan, okay, and then you can add riders with our policy. So let me show you how I would solve this problem. Okay, I do $1 million total face value, right? And I'd break it up like this. $500K on our 10-year term base plan. Okay, $250K on a 15-year and $250K on a 20-year. The reason you can't just go and show him a new 20-year is it's way more expensive, right? And he doesn't need it. So you're not going to win on that. So remember this scenario. He's got term, you're more expensive because he's 3 years in, and he says, I don't need it at the end of time, right? So what happens here is for the first 10 years, all three of these pieces are together. So the total face value is the sum of them, $1 million, okay? So for the next 10 years, the policy is $1 million. At this point, in the 11th year, this piece of it will come to the end of term and can convert, okay, to the decreasing term. So that piece will drop pretty substantially, right? And then it will start going down little by little every year, okay? At which point you get to year 15. This piece goes to convert to decreasing term. So another little drop, and then begins to go down again, right? In year 20, this piece will begin to drop and then go down again. So the product that we built kind of looks like a sloped staircase, right? And again, this is a generality. It's going to be different for every client, but it's going to look the same. The question is, where does the sloped staircase start and how quickly does it slope? And that's going to be dependent on their specifics, right? But in generality, that's how this is going to work. So what's happening here is you cut out all this excess and you're cheaper than their 20-year term because it's not a 20-year term. It's a hybrid policy. It's literally a custom policy that you've built. And you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with this. You could choose to get rid of the 15 when it came and just drop it and the premium drops. You can choose to convert them. You can choose to keep them level. I mean, there's so many choices and you don't need to choose today. You can choose then when we see what the client scenario actually looks like. But the flexibility here is unbelievable, right? And you come in maybe at 60, 70% of their current pricing, right? Okay, so not only did you give them a policy that more accurately mimics their current need, but you got them covered if they're wrong by having the ability to keep that decreasing tail further out, and you're saving them money. It is a win-win-win. Nobody else creates products like this. Nobody else has the ability to, right? Because even if they could stack riders on, which most of these guys do not have provision to be able to do that, okay, but even if these other companies could stack riders on, their rider would go away. So instead of having this nice little flow, it would go boom, 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 right? And it would not accurately mimic their need for insurance. Okay, so folks, this is how you win with term insurance. All right, there's no term insurance out there, in my opinion, all right, and in my experience, that's going to put the consumer in a better position, give them more control, more choice, more flexibility, and more peace of mind than having life insurance through the Primerica companies. It's just not out there. You need to learn this and understand it and learn how to communicate it to people. Because when people understand it like you understand it, it's just common sense. People want to do the right thing. They just don't understand, and they don't know how their policy works. So we've got to show them how their policy works and show them a difference. But it's not price, you guys. If you're competing on price, you're in the wrong ballgame, right? Price is only an issue in the absence of value.